Somebody just left a comment like you've got a porn link on your taskbar in your browser. Well, yeah, absolutely. So I don't make YouTube videos about it, but offline, where I do some counselling with guys who have got certain dysfunctions, porn is something that I've studied for a long time because nobody else is studying it, as far as I'm concerned. So it's like I'm not going to go all, become all embarrassed or bashful about having a porn link. It's like I ask everybody who I counsel, and I've counselled a lot of guys who've been are in a real mess, and they found themselves in trouble with dangerous women, like really dangerous women who've torn their lives apart. And these guys are in a terrible state, and I'm like, right, something we have to get to the bottom of is psychosexuality. It's likely what got you into trouble in the first place. And the way that I set that in motion is, we talk about hedge porn. It's like, what's hedge porn, John? It's like, well, in the days before the internet, pornography was not available in this country, first of all. It was like illegal as hell. And all that was available was like magazines. Magazines like Fiesta, Mayfair, Razzle, yeah? And everyone I speak to can always remember the first time that they were exposed to pornography. All of them. I can remember the first time I was exposed to pornography. A magazine left lying around in the house when I was about 4. And I know that when these leftist sort of gender studies academics start to talk about sexuality, and they say that children are actually sexual creatures, it's like, yeah, they are, right? As soon as a child is exposed to pornography, they'll suddenly start to hunt it down. Children are certainly sexual creatures, exactly as the leftist gender studies academics are saying. It's like they're onto something with that, but no one's actually done any proper research because, well, how are you going to do it? The only way of actually doing it is to would be to expose children to pornography, and no one's doing that. You go to prison for that, and you really ought to go to prison for that. But it's like, in guys that I've counselled, we've always been able to identify an early awakening to sexuality through pornography. And I remember once, if you watch an old video of mine where I'm talking to that one I did with the BBC, where the woman I was debating against and just wiping the floor with, she was a clinical psychologist. And, she'd got a PhD. She got a license to practice, which is something I haven't got. She's like got the right qualifications, so I'm technically like a life coach or a layman in that regard. But she was fully qualified. And I said to her, someone needs to find a way to do a study to work out what the effects of hardcore pornography are on children, because when I was a kid it wasn't available, but it was available to some who'd found it at home. Now, kids, when I was coming up, they'd find a porno tape in the house, and it'd be a matter of invite all the kids in the street in to watch it, and they were all absolutely interested to see it, absolutely curious about it. And it's like, this child sexualization is something that we don't discuss. But when I'm dealing with people who are just screwed, emotionally ruined, broken-hearted, we always have to go to psychosexuality. It's always a key part of people who find themselves in the trouble in the future. It leads to a kind of codependence. It opens up the door to an addiction, much like any other addiction. And the thing is with pornography, there is it's like a drug that there's an unlimited number of flavors of, so it never gets old. So it's like pornography addiction, right, is something that actually starts. If you're going to be someone who becomes like addicted and completely obsessed by pornography, you will start young. So it's like, I was born in 1974. My first time I ever found pornography, I was like 4 years old. So it's like I've been exposed to this, so I understand this actually quite well. I've come to recognise that in myself, as to where after I was exposed to pornography, I then started to actually seek it. And you get to talk. I get to talk. I've talked to hundreds of guys who've had hundreds of problems with. Basically, they've had a bad breakup, or they've been abandoned, and they've found themselves basically to the company of a woman of low character. And in every case, I can ask them about hedge porn. I call it hedge porn because when I was a kid, most of the time, the people would find magazines under the seats of buses, and they would find it sometimes literally in a hedge. So it's hedge porn. You talk to people who are my age, like 40 and above, they would talk about like a pornographic videotape as being like gold dust, in essence, worth an incredible weight of gold at once upon a time. Well, now it's a matter of it's become a disposable product that's available for free if you know where to find it. And it's like, this is revolutionary. Why isn't anyone paying attention to this? So my method of studying it was to actually start to question people who I counselled about their porn habits. And in most cases, the porn, the journey started very young. It comes to it where myself at age 49, I am completely desensitized to pornography. Completely desensitized. It doesn't do anything for me because I'm completely desensitized to it. There's only, and now I'll talk about it, but the only guy I've ever known on the internet who's talked about it directly, Tommy Sotomayor, he gets it too. He's completely desensitized to pornography as well. And he had a similar experience, but he was someone who found himself having sex by the time he was like 11. But the journey into it started with pornography, and it started at about the age of 4 or 5. So no one does the study. No one monitors it. And it'd be a matter of the way that the internet has made it so accessible. It's also in the minds of a lot of people, it's made it something that's, let's say, not unseemly. You know, I'll tell you an amazing porn story. It's like, you guys, you need to, if you've never seen Boogie Nights, you should watch that. There's a movie because the guy who made that, Paul Thomas Anderson, he's a porn connoisseur as well. He's a classic porn connoisseur. He admits it freely. And it's like a wonder of a story as to where the most famous porn star in the history of porn, being John Holmes, is like the only porn star ever who used his birth name in pornography. He actually used his real name. When in every other case it's a matter of they act under a pseudonym. He acted under his real name, and it's like, wow, who would ever even think of doing that now? But it's like there is a psychological dark underbelly of humanity, and it's a matter of porn is let's say it's a stimulant or else a drug, very similar to like coffee, but it's like it's not like alcohol. It's more like coffee. It'd be a source of stimulation, and it'd be a source of let's say passive stimulation. And it'd be absolutely everywhere as to where there's certain organisations in the world. I actually stand with the porn industry on porn shouldn't be available free of charge on the internet anywhere. And that if you want it, if you've got a taste for it, let's say, you should always have to pay for it. But it's like the cat's out of the bag, and no one's interested in passing laws that helps the pornography industry make more money. Nobody. Nobody's even willing to talk about it. No one's even willing to engage in it as a subject or a topic. So it's like that psychologist I was talking to on that day, who I had that debate with, I ended up talking to her about the job for a couple of hours. We sat down and we had a cup of coffee or two together, and we talked about, you know, our experiences of dealing with damaged people. And I said to her, no one's even thinking about this. No one is studying the effects of pornography. But I'm finding porn addiction in guys who are codependent, who've been found to be naive, who've been had their lives destroyed by women of low character and quality, often personality disorders, often actually whores, if you like. They wouldn't be, they're like whores in the classic sense, as to where they're kind of an addict themselves. And it's like you've been feeding someone's addiction in having a relationship with someone who's in essence a bit of a pervert. We don't talk about women being perverts. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about women being nymphomaniacs. And that's only a matter of exposure. We'll talk about men being sex addicts, but we won't talk about women being sex addicts. And it's like you study the porn industry and it's a matter of what's going on there. And there's things you can pick up on. It's like every single one of them's a victim of abuse. Every single one of them. To be someone who thinks that that's actually a valid way of making your way in the world, well, it's not. It's asinine. It's like we can talk about sex, right, and say that and be open about it and say that we are liberated, let's say, but we're not. It's shameful. It can't not be shameful, because related to it is a load of a great deal of involuntary feelings and also chemicals, chemistry, as to where it's say the most psychoactive product in the world. Psychoactive. So it's like, that's like a drug that should be in a bottle, and it's actually distributed in an audiovisual form. The pioneers of the internet is the porn industry. The pioneers of the streaming technology that we all now enjoy is the porn industry. They are actually at the forefront of technology, and they're at the forefront of understanding that there are needs to be met in the world, and that's to do with psychosexuality. So it's like they're drug pushers, literally drug pushers. And you can go away and watch documentaries about it. I've watched every single documentary I think that's ever been made about the porn industry because I research it. And you get guys like Pierre Woodman. Pierre Woodman's been a pornographer for 30-40 years. Even guys like Rocco Siffredi, being a pornographer for 30 years probably. They are absolutely dead set against children getting to see their work. You'll see it in behind the scenes videos, porn industry. And I remember seeing a video once with Rocco Siffredi, and he was having sex with basically a whore from London, because most of them are actually they make more money out of prostitution than they ever will out of pornography. So it's like she might get paid a couple of thousand for the scene, but she'll be charging people a couple of thousand to escort. So it's in essence an advertisement. To some, pornography be of itself, but to others it be actually an advertisement. It's like anyone you'd ever see in a porn movie. This is something that, Jesus, well, you have to really go to the dark places of the world to know this, but I'll tell you, any woman who's an active porn star, now this used to be a thing where I used to keep tabs on the agents' sites, and I'd worked something out as to where it was a matter of porn stars could be booked for what they called bachelor parties, available for bachelor parties, and that was just code for prostitution. Contact the agency and you can hire this porn star. You can have sex with her. It's like, how did Charlie Sheen get himself in so much trouble? He started paying porn stars to be live-in lovers, paying them fortunes, absolute fortunes. It's like, so they were making very good money out of being prostitutes from the porn industry. Now it's like, if you find, there's like in the US porn industry, there's like 4 big, I think probably more now. It's likely fallen to pieces and now just become a free-for-all. In fact, it has. The old porn industry has been completely destroyed by MindGeek. And they actually go a long way to blackballing a lot of porn stars. You know, like a porn star's a porn star and then suddenly they're not a porn star. It's often that they've been fired. And they've been fired because they've mouthed off about the terms and conditions that they're being held under as employees or contracted. And they never get to be porn stars again. But the old system as it was, there used to be like 4 or 5 agents in the US, but the internet changed it, and made it so that entryism became a thing, as to where everyone's now an amateur, where once upon a time it would be a matter of, she's a professional. How would you term a professional? It'd be like one who's contracted to someone like Vivid Entertainment. It's like, shit, in America porn is so mainstream that like Vivid Entertainment, it's like they're the organisation that celebrities go to if they want to make a sex tape. Vivid no longer exist. Why? Because the business model failed. Their attempts to make sort of what we would call like high quality content, you know, like pornos with a story, was no longer cost effective and was defeated by Gonzo. What's Gonzo? Gonzo is a man with a camera, a man with 2 cameras. And now that's gone away. Gonzo porn has been destroyed and been replaced by pure amateur porn. But then there's been a move made in the last 10 years where, oh sorry, I'll go back to the I'll actually go back to it. As I say, I'll go back to talking about Rocco Siffredi. You know, I saw a behind the scenes video once where a girl who was a porn star in a video with Rocco Siffredi said, you know, I've been watching your videos since I was 11. And it just blew him off his feet. I've seen interviews with Pierre Woodman, who's a pornographer, and he's like, these girls who turn up, it's like they are absolutely crazy. Their mental illness off the scale. It's like, we might be looking at, you might be thinking, oof, you know, you're thrown off, but you're always looking at a victim of abuse. Always. It's like you can't get a clear picture of what the world is until you actually visit and study its darkest places. And that's going back to talking to the clinical psychologist who was like a Miss Labour Party. I said, no one's doing any study into what actual internet free hardcore pornography is doing to the minds of adults and the minds of young people. And she says, well, you'll have to do it, John. So I did. So I've studied it for years. In some regards, it can be followed like a soap opera. The more interesting side of the porn industry to study is to actually read all the gossip. There's an internet marketplace for gossip, and it'd be like a soap opera. As to where actually the other place for porn star gossip is actually Twitter. All porn stars have got their own Twitter page. So it's like they're actively marketing themselves into social media to then bring viewers to the paid subscription sites. But you don't have to go to the paid subscription sites. You can go to all kinds of sites and find pornography, and no one's ever going to stop you downloading it for free, because no one has got the neck to stand up and say this industry needs to be regulated and parts of it criminalized. MindGeek is the organisation that controls the porn industry. MindGeek. They were once a company that was based out of, I think, Luxembourg, and then even, I think, Czechoslovakia, and then moved to Canada. They've grown using exactly the same model as YouTube because they've raised their money. MindGeek were able to raise the money to buy most of the porn industry out, buy up the studios, buy up all the major studios, and then wipe other people out by stealing other people's content and posting it for free to stop them getting paid. So if you can stop the competition from getting paid, it's in your best interest for you to put it out there, put their content out for free, and then charge for yours. Who are MindGeek? Go and look them up. They're a listed public company in Canada. Just look them up. They've stolen everybody else's pornography and given it away for free to destroy and consolidate the porn industry. And when it's addressed, people are like, who gives a fuck? No politician in the world is going to come out and say, hey, I've looked into this industry and there's some serious problems with it, and these problems are making it so pornography is available for children to watch, when it wouldn't take so much to put it all behind a paywall. It wouldn't take much at all. It would just take a political will to do so, and those who produce it, except for MindGeek, who own Pornhub and all the rest of the streaming services, they own them all. So they're able to generate revenue, advertising revenue from other people's content. It's like all the music in the world's on YouTube, and YouTube usually don't pay anything at all to the artists, but will charge advertising revenue to, well, in essence, have adverts attached to everyone else's product. That's how Google became so rich. They stole everyone's content, and they still do to this day. Everyone who puts something on the internet is having their content stolen by Google and monetized. MindGeek do exactly the same as Google have done, but for pornography. Pornhub are so bold as to, in the US, advertise straight out into the open. Mainstream. They're a mainstream company. You can invest in them if you want. They're floated on the stock exchange in Canada, and no one seems interested in stopping them doing what they're doing. Nobody. But then saying that, sites like OnlyFans, right? This is the thing about OnlyFans that you don't know. Tommy Sotomayor had a spell where he was the biggest. He couldn't. Rumble hadn't come along yet. So there was no video platform in the world that would allow him to have an account, because as soon as he opens an account, 1,000 black women complain and say he's racist, he's sexist. Take his content down. They all flag him, and he gets kicked off. He's had YouTube channels with millions of subscribers and had them taken off him. He's had Twitter accounts with massive followings and had them deleted. So everywhere he's gone, he's had all his stuff deleted. So the only place... he's on Rumble now. Just on Rumble, it's fine, he's on Rumble. But once upon a time, the only place he could actually safely broadcast was OnlyFans. So he set himself up with an OnlyFans. And people's like, oh, so you're into the porn industry? It's like, no, I've found a platform where no one gives a fuck and it's completely unregulated. So Tommy started doing things on his OnlyFans like, subscribe to my OnlyFans and we'll watch all the pay-per-view fights. We'll watch all the pay-per-view big American football games. We'll watch movies. We'll do watch-alongs. He did a watch-along once on OnlyFans that I would die to watch, of Transformers the movie being one of my favourites too. Like, no, I'm not subscribing to your OnlyFans, Tommy. But he went on OnlyFans, and then when OnlyFans decided to clamp down on the content creators, actually clamp down on them and punish them and cut their revenues, Tommy Sotomayor fought them and won on behalf of all the whores on Instagram, in OnlyFans, because he went from zero to being the biggest act on OnlyFans. So suddenly he starts to collectively bargain for the other people who have OnlyFans accounts, because he's the one who's got the most subscribers. He was the biggest source of money for a while. Can you believe that? But it's like it's gone too far as to where now it can't be regulated. It can't be stopped. There was a window about 4 or 5 years ago where if they wanted to, the mistake that MindGeek, who gives all the porn away for free to the kids, who actually market to kids as well. It's like, if you market, this is a thing that not so many people get, right? If you're marketing to paedophiles, porn, you're also marketing to children. It has a double purpose. Content that paedophiles would like to see of young girls is also content that children would like to see. Isn't that creepy? So in some regards, you know, if you see that kind of very young girl content, kids are attracted to that as well. That's what they look for. You're like, isn't that creepy? Isn't that terrible? Yeah. It's an absolute disaster that no one's actually honest enough or willing to talk about. I'm one of the few people, and I don't make YouTube videos about the porn industry ever, but offline, when I'm talking to people who get in contact with me for counselling, there's always a large conversation that goes on about pornography. Always a large conversation, because it's become part and parcel of people's issues. It's like, when they say porn addiction, it's like it's addiction to stimuli. You have to recognise that the trans people and the like, you know, the sex education, gender side of it, they're right about children being sexual creatures. And it's like, how do you make a child a sexual creature? Well, you sexualise them. How do you sexualise them? You expose them to porn, and the neurochemistry does the rest, and there's no turning it off. And there was nothing in the world that existed like pornography. 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. It's like we've invented a new drug and we flooded the world with it. And we wonder why so many relationships fall down. We wonder why we have peculiar standards of things like beauty. And we wonder why we have mental health crises that can't be cured, that are impossible to treat. And a lot of it is because to talk about porn and sex is unseemly. And it'll always be unseemly. And we can't stop it being unseemly. As much as people would like to normalise porn, it's still shameful. They still feel it. It's involuntary. They feel it. Now, I've talked about it now for 28 minutes. Am I ashamed of myself? No, because I'm completely desensitized to it. It's become an area of fascinating study that is similar to, actually, in some regards, following a sport or following like a reality television situation. You notice in the past where reality TV shows about porn have been hits. The hit show by the Seymour Butts guy, it was syndicated to probably every country in the world, and that was on like Showtime. You don't really get as mainstream as them. It's just standard cable in the US, or was. But it would appear on Channel 4. You had it where there used to be a television programme in the UK called Eurotrash. And a big joke in my house was, in our family was one of my cousins. He's a cousin of mine. He got caught wrong by his parents sneaking downstairs when he was 4 and 5 years old to watch Eurotrash, which was a sort of a late night Channel 4 magazine show that actually included news and interviews with like the European porn business. He was sneaking out of bed and going downstairs when his parents were asleep to watch that, and he got caught wrong with it. And to us, we just find it funny. And it's a matter of, well, he's been exposed to pornography at a young age. How did that happen? No one knows. He could have been exposed to pornography at primary school. I know I was. You get in primary school where someone would say, hey, what would I found at home? And it'd be Dad's magazine collection. And they bring them to school. So it's like, you get that in kids' minds and you get kids experimenting and experimenting on other kids. And there you've got your roots of as to where people are, in essence, the minds have been corrupted. They've, in some regards, been in the minds like raped. No one's done any study. No one understands it at all. But it's like there's a very strong, like 100% one for one. I talked to a guy who's found himself in a lot of trouble and has now developed profound psychological and emotional problems. And I get to talking to them about when they were first introduced to porn, and I'll ask them to tell the story and describe it as much detail as they can remember. And they remember every single detail about when they were first introduced to porn. It's like it's one for one. You viewers out there, you think about it, right? You think about it right now. When was the first time in your life you were exposed to pornography? You know. Leave a comment. It's mostly anonymous. Leave a comment and tell the story of when you were first exposed to porn with as much detail as you can remember, and you'd be surprised as you would be able to remember every single detail. Now, it's like, you know, I've collaborated with a lot of other psychologists while I've been studying stuff like this. I've passed this information on to loads of other people, and they don't openly talk about it, but they know it and they apply it themselves. So it's like Richard Grannon knows a lot about it. It's one of my tools. It's actually one of my therapeutic tools that I taught to Richard Grannon, where I sometimes cry about Grannon having stolen loads of my work. Well, that's part of it. It's like you need to talk to guys who found themselves in deep trouble, and you need to get a handle on the psychosexual mind as to that they may be having, you know, in essence, emotional flashbacks to when they first encountered pornography, as to where it infantilizes them. It takes them back to the original time and place. So it's a matter of, they used to say once upon a time that sex as a child, or being opposed to it, stunts your growth. It certainly does. It certainly stunts your growth, because pornography, in its when you were first exposed to it, you'd say you're thinking about it now, aren't you? You can remember the first time you were ever exposed to it. Right now, can't you? You can tell an amusing story about finding a magazine in a park on a bench. Actually, I've spoke to people. I've asked this question before because it's a cracking question to ask, and the stories that come back are fucking hilarious sometimes. That's why I call it hedge porn. I've spoke to people who've actually found a pornographic magazine in a hedge, blowing in the wind, and that'd be the first time they ever found one, and it'd be ooh, ooh. It's like it has an effect on kids. It's not something like, you know, I could have a conversation with an adult with a child present, and they won't be able to follow the conversation. They might be able to listen in, but they won't understand the words. And if you have an adult conversation, you can actually code it so the child can be just confounded and none of it registers. You can do that. There's kids around. It's like, don't use bad language, because you're being a bad example. It's not that the kid doesn't know all the bad words. It's that they draw some, in essence, meaning from policing it. Don't normalize it. It's one of my worst habits is casual swearing. And where have I picked that up? Movies, and the way that people talk around me. Although my parents don't swear like that. They don't swear at all. They frown upon it. So when I'm talking to my parents, I don't swear either. I can actually operate professionally without using cuss words, but when I'm sat in my living room, I say what I fucking like. I have the full width and breadth of me expression, don't I? But around people who don't find it, don't like it, I'd soon get the message that it's inappropriate and can completely cut it out. I could be I've been a professional salesman. Unless you know you can get away with swearing, you don't do it. It's bad. Certain people get offended by hearing it, and they have instincts as to police it because they were raised right. And so we keep that under control. We don't show ourselves to be uncouth. But it's like sexualization. It's big. We don't accept it as that. So as you can see, it's like, yeah, fair enough. There was somebody found saw a porn link on my taskbar. Oh yeah, it's like I research it. It's like it's not particularly titillating to me. I'm totally desensitized to it, and that's not a good thing. But it'd be a matter of now you're totally desensitized to it. You can think about it in a rational manner without being, in essence, caught up in it. No one's done the research. The only people who are doing the research are, strangely, the gender people. They think, and they say that children are sexual beings. And I counter that with, well, they can be if they're exposed to pornography, a drug that's compatible with any human being in the world. There's no child in the world who's got any kind of defense against pornography. None. There's very few adults who've got any kind of defense against it. And it's a matter of those who have a defense against it are just completely desensitized to it. And not that it doesn't have an effect, but that it doesn't have a, let's say, it doesn't drive behavior. I'm celibate. I'm more or less asexual. It's like, I wouldn't want that for everyone. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not a good way of living your life, but if that's where you find yourself, why can't we work together to raise awareness of it, to shut the door and get all the free porn thrown off the internet? It should be completely an open and shut case as to where no one in their right mind could ever say, no, that's wrong, we shouldn't do that. No one. But no one's going to do it because no one would ever have the guts to say, hey, I've been studying this and it's a deeply disturbing, multifaceted problem that no one wants to talk about at all. Nobody wants to talk about. It's shameful. And I'm saying, well, yeah, it's because you can't normalize sex because it's biological. People's responses to it are involuntary. You tell me there isn't a correlation between cluster B personality disorder and children who've been exposed to pornography. It's there. There is a correlation. An absolute one-for-one correlation as to where pornography has damaged the brains of everyone practically in the world who've been exposed to it. Those who haven't been exposed to it have got an edge in life over everyone who has. Seriously. So it's like, I ain't going to be, say, somebody called me out and says, you've got a porn link on your taskbar, and it's like, do you want me to make a video about it? I'm one of the few people who actually takes the psychological effects of pornography seriously. No one else has got the guts to touch it. Or if they have, they wouldn't openly talk about it. It's like every single person who takes part in that industry has been abused as a child. It's the child abuse industry. It's just the part you can see. It's the part that's sticking out. It's where it's been exploited, yeah, for the purposes of entertainment. And it's like for every 1,000, there's probably one porn star for every 25,000 kids that have been corrupted by porn and child sex abuse. There's probably one porn star for every 25,000 kids who've been tampered with. Because that is what you've got on the screen, that's what you see. You see someone there who's got a profound mental illness, and that lifestyle has been normalized. So they've found themselves in the company of other people who are these broken children. That's why when I mentioned watch Boogie Nights, you'll notice in it that every single character in it is a child in the mind. They're all very, very childish people. They're all underdeveloped degenerates. It's like they've got the minds of children. They behave like children. They talk like children. And it's like, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at people who've had their emotional growth stunted at the age of 4 and 5. As I say, done a hell of a lot of counselling me with men who found themselves in sexual relationships with highly dysfunctional women, and it be a matter of it's like the relationship they've been in, it's like they've been in a relationship with someone who was in essence a drug, that the person was a drug that they became addicted to. They just didn't realize the person was a drug. It's like if someone was slipping you an ecstasy tablet in your coffee once a day and you felt great, and then suddenly they left your life and you go into withdrawal not knowing that you were a drug addict. So it's like, I understand this really, really intrinsically, having gone through it. I get it. So I talk to other people about it, and so now you got to treat this like you're going through cold turkey. You never asked to become a drug addict, but you became one. Because you didn't realise you were a drug addict. Much in the same way as the doctors for years were telling me that you're suffering from heart failure. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Your machines are faulty. Your science is worthless to me. You just don't understand that I work a little bit differently. There is absolutely nothing wrong with me. And that's because in a state of heart failure was normal to me. And for you to convince me that I was sick when I could play football for 90 minutes was stupid and ridiculous, and I laugh you off the edge of the world. But in 2023, they can prove it to me. You've always been sick. You just didn't know it because you'd always been sick. Pornography works like that. It's like the frog that's boiled in the pot. It's lethal. I, in my way of being completely desensitized to pornography, it's not a good thing. But I can be like, hey, I'm lucky. I saw a men's magazine when I was 4-year-old, and I remember every detail of it. Every detail, like I'd photographed it. It became one with what is called the psychosexual mind. The psychosexual mind, once upon a time before pornography, was a place where the thing you would think about when you masturbate is your psychosexual mind, right? Pornography has expanded that. So it's like there are people out there who would be age 25 to 30, and their first experience of seeing porn would have been to have seen hardcore pornography. Now it's like pornography's always been hardcore. So it's like anything that you might think is sort of maybe a modern trend or a kink, no, it's all there in 1970s porn as well. Nothing changes. Nothing. It's, in some regards, the most boring product ever produced, but because it's psychoactive, it's endlessly addictive and has the appearance of having endless variety. It's like, anyone wants a serious conversation with me about the effects of pornography, I'll have a serious conversation with you about it. Usually that kind of conversation I have with people is reserved for those who pay me. and it's done in secrecy, and it's confidential. But the other people that I speak to about it, they're also people with an interest in psychology. It's like, it's bigger than people think. I'm not ashamed of the fact that I'm one of the few people who actually analyses it and actually, in some regards, follows it like a soap opera. I hear about it when it was only about a month ago that one of the most famous names in pornography blew her own head off with a shotgun. You hear of murder-suicides, porn stars, where, oh, have you got a boyfriend? Yeah, oh yeah. Does he know you're having this gangbang today? Oh yeah, he's all for it. But then when it happens, he consented. And the same with the porn stars. Why are you so upset? Why are you so traumatized? You consented. You consented. You can't complain. You consented to this. I had no idea what you had no idea what you were letting yourself in for. But you consented. You signed a release form. You hear of murder-suicides. Boyfriend who consented when it actually happened. He thought he might, in his mind, he thought it might be titillating. I thought, ooh, this is sexy. Ooh, this is kinky. But when it actually happened, it destroyed him. It destroyed his life. It destroyed one of the most sacred things that he had, being his relationship. And the next thing you know, you're talking about a murder-suicide. How often do porn stars get murdered? A lot. How often do they commit suicide? Often. It's like a conveyor belt. Severe mental illness. You see pictures. This is a thing that's a thing on the internet you can go away and look at. Like then and now pictures of porn stars. And it's like, she's let herself go. She's let herself go. Whoa, she's let herself go. It's like there's no career after it. Like they're just in ruin. And then you get a world, but the thing is, they're so narcissistic that it's like the world has a problem. There's actually porn star activists in the world who want like sex workers, as they call themselves, because that's the sex worker rights thing. That's about porn stars. That's porn star political activism. It's what it is. They're like, society's got a problem. They stigmatize us. It's like they can't not do. It's a involuntary reaction. It's like you're asking the whole world to be hypersexualized like you are to find your activity socially acceptable, and it's never going to happen. But you'll glob yourself on to like the LGBTQP plus movement and demand rights for sex workers, when what you do has a psychosexual and psychosomatic involuntary hormone effect on others. It's massive. There's a thing about porn where it's heavy, right? I say you get it a lot, where people will complain. I've had my nudes stolen off my phone. I've been hacked. I'm like, well, you're a pornographer. You created an image that was heavy that in the future could come back and destroy you. But you did it anyway, and you sent it to someone and you trusted them. It's like, how in the world can you be surprised? Why are you able to get away with suing somebody for like revenge porn? Why aren't you being prosecuted as a pornographer? And it's like, well, no one's really thought about it. The legal system certainly hasn't. You get someone gets sent to prison for releasing revenge porn to the world, and it's like, what are you doing videoing yourself like that? That's a weapon someone can use against you. You'll for certain regret that, because once that's out in the world, it's never coming back. You can't stop it. I used to talk to a young lady who had borderline personality disorder when I used to make a lot of videos about borderline personality disorder, and she was really dangerous, but she had so much insight, and she had the dirtiest mind and the most sort of alluring hypersexual nature that I've ever come across in a woman. She was really dangerous. And she started to fancy me, and she started to post like pornographic videos on YouTube. And she'd send me a link and say, watch this. And I'd be like, you've put that on YouTube? Yeah, what's wrong with it? Because to her it was absolutely normalised. Normal. And I'm like, take it down before YouTube do. She does ASMR videos now, and she's actually quite good at them. But she was making homemade pornography, and she made a homemade sort of soft porn video, and it's like, John, watch this. You'll enjoy this. This will get you going. And I'm like, take it down. It's really dangerous. You're going to lose your YouTube account, and it's gonna get out in the world. And it wasn't 2 weeks later. It's like, that video I made's ended up on Pornhub, and I can't make them take it down. I'm like, try to tell you. I tried to tell you, but you didn't want to listen. You didn't think it was a problem. Oh, well, nobody's going to be bothered about that. And it's like, it's a psychoactive product. Of course there's a market for it. It's like leaving a bag of cocaine on a table in a pub and thinking that no one's going to pick it up. Well, no one's into that. Really? Pornography and cocaine, they kind of go hand in hand too, like whores and cocaine, like promiscuous, risky, guilt-ridden, taboo, under the table, adultery, affairs. I mean, that's bad stuff. It's like, that's damaging to you. It's damaging to everybody around you. It fucks the world up, having affairs. And it's like, but you still find people having affairs, don't you? They still do it. Why? Because it's a drug. Anyway, I hope you've learned something new. But no, it's like, I'm not ashamed that someone found a porn link on me. Taskbar. I'm not in the least bit ashamed of it. If you want to be effective as a psychologist dealing with men's issues, certainly, you have to be able to address the subject of pornography and its effects on children and its effects on adults as well. So it's a matter of, it's actually a field of study of mine. I'll hold my hand up, no shame about it. No one else is doing the research. No one else is brave enough to talk about it. The only people who are brave enough to talk about it are, strangely, people who would have completely diametrically opposed views to me. They would say that society has a problem, not that individuals have a problem with pornography. They'd say society has a problem with being intolerant of it. Like narcissists, they think they're the centre of the universe and that the world should stop and start at their command. I haven't got a problem with it. Why should you? Be what they'd say. So I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to say, finding porn on my taskbar, I haven't got a problem with it. It's your problem. But someone's right to raise it. And I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to share what I've learned about the disastrous effects it has on people. Being someone who over a lifetime has become completely desensitized to it. Because it's everywhere. But nobody talks about it. I talk about it, but usually I charge.